So I got cut off in the last video. I've got limited space on my computer at the moment. I'm going to try and keep this under 10 minutes. Um, Before I continue, just a word about... No, I'll save that for the end. Yeah, so where I got cut off, I was talking about other examples in history of chemical attacks used in warfare. And I think this is important because the alternative to it not being the Syrian government being responsible is therefore the rebel groups, either collectively or one of them being responsible. Well, let's look at history where there have been examples of chemical warfare. In almost every case, it's been a nation state, i.e., at the hands of an organized government. If you look at the examples that we know of, the First World War, during trench warfare, that was nation states. The Iran-Iraq War, nation states. Um, World War II, the Japanese use of chemical weapons on and chemical experimentations and so on in the notorious actions in China. Um, and Saddam's use of chemical weapons on the Kurds in the Al-Anfal campaign of the late 80s. These are all examples of dictatorships or nation states using them. The only example I can think of that stands out that wasn't a nation state was the sarin gas attack on the Tokyo subway in 1995. But I would suggest is more an exception than the norm. Even most terrorist attacks don't have that sort of nature. So by simply looking at history, it's far more plausible that a nation state was responsible. Um, but anyway, I'm not going to keep going over that. The latest developments are that, of course, Russia has condemned these actions at the UN. Russia, backed by China and Bolivia, tried to veto action or tried to push for an official condemnation of the airstrikes. Um, I will say that President Trump's announcement of mission accomplished was incredibly boneheaded and bombastic. Um, in terms of this particular strike being accomplished, that might be true, but I think what that immediately makes people think of is Bush Jr.'s infamous mission accomplished words, which of course it was nothing of the sort. Iraq turned into a bloody quagmire. Now, I still would point out that the situations are very different. With Iraq in 2003, that was a war initiated by the US and the UK, but in this case, there's already a war raging on. So that is a very important difference. Nevertheless, mission accomplished is an incredibly reckless thing to say. Um, Vince Cable earlier, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, made a good point that whilst he had no issues with condemnation of Assad, we are dealing with a president here who's erratic. Trump has a tendency to flip flop on major issues, and so if this is going to be a deeper campaign, we need to be incredibly careful about that. I, for one, would certainly not favour any sort of ground invasion or anything of that kind. I don't think it's going to happen, but I do think that we, need to be very careful here. In terms of the effectiveness of the strikes themselves, the Syrian government claims little damage was done. So, from my point of view, from the Syrian government's perspective, that's a bit of a reckless thing to say because that is only going to provoke Trump to carry out more strikes. Um, it would surely be more practical for the Syrian regime from their point of view to be acting with indignation. Um, but this whole thing is a complete mess. And the truth is, nobody, none of the major powers when it comes to Syria is squeaky clean. I will say this, though, and for those who have the blame the West first mindset and the blame the West for everything mindset, if the West acts, it is condemned as only doing it for materialistic purposes. For it's imperialistic warmongering. Well, imperialistic against who? The Assad regime. Now, if the West doesn't act for whatever reason, whether it's a reluctance of leadership, whether it's in the case of the UK being voted down in Parliament, whatever the case, then the West is accused of not caring. So, to those people who are going to point fingers at the West no matter what, you can't have it both ways. You can't, on one hand, say the West doesn't care, but then criticize the West when it does act. What is the alternative to precise military strikes? More talks? Is that what Mr. Corbyn is proposing? What is more talks going to achieve? I will say one thing, and I'll repeat what I said in the first part. I am uneasy about us going ahead with these strikes before the Organisation for the Prevention of Chemical Weapons team has been able to do their work. Even if those results aren't going to be 100% certain, I do think that was maybe a bit foolhardy for May, Macron, and Trump to do that without them having completed their mission, because it makes the NATO countries look like the aggressors. And I don't believe that's the case. I believe that Assad was the aggressor here. This is the regime that, in all probability, carried out an illegal use of chemical weapons on civilians, backed by Russia. So, once again, I think Russia has absolutely no right to be pointing fingers. But this is a very, very messy situation, and there are absolutely no easy answers. There isn't really much more to say because this is an ongoing situation. I don't know what's going to follow on from this, if there's going to be more airstrikes. Trump has certainly sent out mixed messages. On one hand, he's saying mission accomplished. On the other hand, he's threatening that if his red line is crossed, then there will be more action. It's difficult to see us not taking more action if indeed there are more chemical attacks, but that would only indicate that this has failed as a military operation. The good news is there appears to have been no civilian casualties. That would have been really bad for moral reasons, obviously, but also because it would have handed a propaganda victory to Russia and Syria. But it appears there's been no casualties, military or civilian, certainly none that have been reported. But if they have damaged facilities, that's a good thing because it reduces the chance of Assad carrying out such an attack again, at least for a while. But no one should be complacent about this situation. It's a very, very complex situation. I'm not even going to humour conspiracy theorists who are still churning out that garbage that the attacks were faked. Not a single one of them has produced tangible evidence to that effect. Russia hasn't produced any evidence. All Russia has is conspiracy theories, and that's it. Um, so I would say Russia is in a somewhat desperate position. It's easy to say that the West is acting out of desperation. I would say Russia is looking rather desperate at the moment by continuing to churn out the propaganda of a brutal dictatorship. But like I say, there's no easy answers here. Now, a final few words. I will allow comments to be open for now, but I am fully aware of the emotive nature of the subject. And I am fully aware that in my last video about Syria, I got a ton of personal abuse. I accept that comes with the territory. I have my opinions on this subject. Other people have their opinions. I'll keep the comment section open for now. You can disagree with me, but I'm not going to get into a back and forth with the comments. I say what I need to say in the video. So leave your comments, but don't expect me to reply. Okay, I'm saying what I need to say in the video. It's time consuming. It's frankly energy consuming, and I just see the point of going back and forth when it's an echo chamber. People won't agree with me. I'm not going to agree with them. These ostensibly on a lot of the blame the West first points. You know, I'm prepared to talk to people who are going to be reasonable and say that they acknowledge the excesses of the Assad regime. But I am under no obligation to, pander to people, to engage with people who just want to call me names and, defend the indefensible as far as I'm concerned. Um, so, final few words. What's my position on this? Am I a hawk? I'm cautiously supportive of these precision strikes, but I would be very cautious about deeper action. I think we do need to be very careful about that. Um, but hopefully, I mean, maybe the Assad regime is putting on a brave front. Maybe this has destroyed facilities, and that's a good thing. Um, I don't think there's space in this video to say everything that's important that could be said. I'll keep the comment section open for now, but if that's abused, I'm going to close it. I'm under no obligation to give a platform to people. I am not a news network. I'm an individual. So I'm under no obligation to give people a platform or to engage in lengthy back and forth, heated, vitriolic debates. Leave your comment. You can agree with me or disagree with me, but feel free to make your own video if you think I'm completely wrong. Feel free to make your own video. But I have no time and no respect for Assad apologists and Russia propagandists. Simple as that. If you're critical of airstrikes, that's fine. I've seen reasonable people who are critical of the strikes, but they acknowledge Assad as a bad guy. Those people I'm willing to, have dialogue with. But Assad apologists, no, I've no time for them. I'm not going to censor the comments unless they're vitriolic against myself, but I'm under no obligation to pander to people. Simple as that. This is my opinions, my channel. Deal with it.